Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to study the Navi Ezekiel, the Prophet Ezekiel, chapter 42. As those of you who have been studying with us are aware that the last two chapters, and this one is continuing on the theme of the vision of the third temple, and we are traveling through a mystical vision of the Prophet Ezekiel, as he ascends chamber to chamber through the third temple, the one that will be built in the future. God brought him in a vision to the land of Israel, to the temple, and is bringing him step by step into holier and holier parts of the temple. We learned as he shed chatos v'asham, shed sin, where the places where the sacrifices were washed. We learned as he ascended closer and closer into the holy portions of the Beit HaMikdash. And today we are going to continue on his journey, on his mystical journey, and we are going to study a concept, an idea, the idea of l'havdil ben kodesh l'chol, the division between holy and profane. This is something which is also a very important concept when it comes to the worship of a true God, as opposed to the worship of an idol. In the worship of an idol, the one who is strong and powerful, the one who is able to bring more sacrifices to the idol, is the one who supposedly gets closer to that idol. The one that, however, when it comes to God, it requires holiness. It requires shedding evil. It requires shedding the outer garments of ourselves, that we clothe ourselves in arrogance and in pride. And I'm not talking about the good kind of pride here. I mean the kind of pride that leads to further arrogance and further sin. To shed all of that, to purify ourselves, make ourselves holy before we are worthy to enter into the innermost holy parts. As we said before, the Kohanim, the priests that are going to be in the third temple, are only the priests that follow the ways of Tzadok HaKohen, the ways of Tzidkut, the ways of righteousness. We're going to see that theme expressed here as Ezekiel proceeds through the chambers of the third temple. The first several verses will have again descriptions which seem kind of boring and difficult on the surface with all of the measurements, but try to imagine through your mind as he builds this building through the visions that he gives us. Vayotzieni, and he, this is verse 1, he, the man, the angel who's leading him through the temple, the shining angel, brought me out el hachotzer hachitzon, he brought me out to the outer courtyard. I was all the way in at the Heichal, all the way in the Kodesh, the section, the holy section where the menorah and the shulchan and the altar of the incense was standing, but he brought me outside. Haderach terach tzafon, he brought me out through the northern path. Vayavieni halalishkan, he brought me to the room asher neged hagizra, which was opposite the empty space. Remember, empty space is reminiscent of humility. This is something that we have discussed before. Vasher neged habinyan halatzafon, which was opposite the building, the temple, which was towards the north. El Pnei Orach Amos Hamea, on opposite the 100 cubit long wall, Pesach HaTzafon, which was where the northern door was, the Arocha v'Chamishim Amos, the building which was 50 cubits wide. Neged HaEsrim, opposite the angle of the 20 cubits, Asher Lochatzar Apnimi, which was in the inner courtyard of Beneged HaRitzpah, and opposite the pavement, Asher Lochatzar Achitzono, which was in the outer courtyard, Atik El Pnei Atik Bashlishim, which you had one ledge over another ledge in 3 tiers. V'lifnei halishachos, and then there was an area before these rooms, these chambers, Mahalach Eser Amot, which was a 10 cubit distance, Rochav El Apnimis, which was running wide along the inner part, Derech HaMa'echas, along with a pathway which was 1 cubit wide, Upitzcheim Atzafon, their openings were on the northern side. V'halishachos ha'elyonos kitzuros, and the upper chambers, they were shortened, Ki yochlu atikim, because there were ledges that took away from the space, mehena me'atachtonos, from the bottom ones of me'atachonos, and from the middle ones, binyan, part of the building. Ki mishulashot hena, they were arranged in 3 tiers. V'ein lohen amudim ka'amudei achatzeros, but there were no columns there like there were columns outside in the outer courtyard. Al kein etzal me'atachtonos, which is why they were raised up over the lower ones, me'atichonos, and from the middle ones, me'aretz, from the ground. V'goder asher lachutz le'umat ha'leshachos, and there was a fence that was on the outside opposite these rooms, derech ha'chatzar hachitzon al pnei ha'leshachos arko 50 amma, outside the outer courtyard, opposite the rooms, which was a length of 50 cubits. Ki orech ha'leshachot, because the length of these rooms, asher lachatzar, that were opening up to the courtyard hachitzona, the outer courtyard, 50 amma, were 50 cubits, b'hinei al pnei ha'hechal me'ama, and they were opposite the hechal, the holy part of the building, 100 cubits. Mitachat ha'leshachot, and under these rooms, or beneath or below these rooms, ha'ela hamevi me'hakadim, which would come from the eastern side, bevo'o lahena, when one comes from the east side, me'achatzar hachitzona, from the outer courtyard. V'rochav geder ha'chatzar, and the width of the length of the courtyard, derech ha'kadim, on the east place, al pnei ha'gizra, opposite the open space, al pnei ha'binyan, and opposite the building, l'shachos, there existed another room, or the other chambers. The derech lefnehem, there was a passageway in front of them, kimar eha l'shachot, that looked like, similar to the rooms, asher derech hatzafon, which was in the northern pathway, ke'arkon kein rachban, it was square, kol motza v'chol motza ehenu v'chemishpetehenu v'pischehen, with all of its entrances and exits and its rules as to how it was to be built. And just like the entrances to these rooms, asher derech hadarom, which was on the southern side, petach barosh darach, they opened into the beginning of this pathway, derech b'fnei ha'gederes hagina, which was a pathway that led before the portion which was surrounded by this gate, or fence, derech hakodim bevo'an, which was also in the eastern side when one was approaching from the east. Now, I know it's hard to imagine all of these buildings and measurements and so on. Again, like in the previous chapters, you're welcome to analyze them. There are commentaries which draw through diagrams everything that he's discussing. I'm not going to go there right now. Just try to imagine him walking outside of the holy part of the temple into the courtyard, into these rooms which were part of the holier part, but opened up into the outer courtyard where the general public would be able to stand. So then verse 13 is where I'm up to. Vayomer Eli, and he, meaning the angel, said to me, Lishchos hatzafon, these northern rooms, Lishchos hadaron, and these southern rooms, Asher al pnei hagizra, that open into this open space, Heina Lishchos hakodesh, these are those holy rooms, Asher yochlu sham hakohanim, that the priests can eat there and perform the eating of these karbanot, which was a holy ritual, which was a special ritual. This was the ritual of enjoying the presence of God by eating the meat that comes from the table of God. Asher krovim la'Adonai, those kohanim who are close to God. This is what's the crucial point here. Those kohanim, only those kohanim who through their righteousness have achieved that level, will be allowed to sit in these rooms and enjoy the bounty and the pleasure of the food that comes from God's table. Kodshei HaKodashim, the holy of the holiest foods. Sham yanichu kodshei HaKodashim, it is in this place only where they will be able to put down the meat of the Holy of Holies, v'hamincha, and the meal offerings, v'achatas, and the sin offerings, v'asham, and the guilt offerings, ki hamakom kadosh, because this is a special holy place. So only those priests who are close to God. So in the future temple, only ones who are worthy will be able to eat and enjoy that closeness to God. Bivo'ama kohanim, verse 14, when those kohanim, when those priests come, when they enter, that is when they'll be allowed to eat, only when they enter those rooms. And they will not be allowed to leave into the outer courtyard where the people are, because they will have to eat it in those special rooms. V'sham yanichu bigdehen, and there they will have to leave their clothing, the special clothing that they have for the service. Asher yashar suvahen, that they serve in them, ki kodeshen, and those clothing are only meant for in that room. V'lavshu begadim achirim, they will have to get dressed in other less holy clothing. V'karvu al asher la'am, and then they will be able to go out to the rest of the nation who have not achieved this level of holiness. So only those that are worthy are able to enter this room. And when one enters this room, one wears special clothing. When one goes out, one is not worthy of wearing the special clothing. This clothing is similar to clothing of royalty, which one only can wear when one is closer in the presence of God and when one is worthy of that. But when one leaves, one has to take those clothing off, put them away, and then they can join the rest of the nation that are outside, that are not able to come this close. V'chilas hamidos, and then he had finished all of the measurements of Abayis HaPnimi, of the inner house. V'yotziani derech hashar, he took me out by the way of a gate, asher panav derech hakadim, which faced towards the east. Umidados aviv saviv, and he measured all around it. Madad ruach hakadim b'knei amida chamesh meot kanim b'knei amida saviv. He used the measuring rod 500 times on the eastern side, all around, and then he was Madar Rochat Safon, and on the northern side, another Chamesh Meod Kanim, 500 rounds, Biknei Amida Saviv, all the way around. And then verse 18, it's Rachadarim on the southern side, Madar Chamesh Meod Kanim, Biknei Amida. And verse 19, Savav al Rachayam, he went on the western side, Madar Chamesh Meod Kanim, Biknei Amida, one giant square of 500 rods, measuring rods in each one. La'arba Ruchot Midado, he measured all four sides, Chomelo Saviv Saviv, a wall surrounding the entire structure, Orach Chamesh Meot, V'rochav Chamesh Meot, which was 500 by 500, and this wall was for what purpose? And this is really the theme of this chapter, Lahavdil Bein HaKodesh L'chol. This wall was to separate between the holy and the profane. There is a difference between holy and profane. In order to achieve holiness, one has to come close to God. One cannot achieve this level of holiness without shedding the things which detract from Him and God. That is the lesson of this chapter, is Lahavdil Bein Kodesh L'chol. Thank you so much for studying chapter 42. In 43, we will continue the mystical journey of Ezekiel through the third temple, and we will, of course, continue, and I hope you join me until we finish this book of Ezekiel, and, of course, beyond this as well.